Hello and welcome to Inside Cancer Careers, a podcast from the National Cancer Institute, where we explore all the different ways in which people fight cancer, and we hear their stories. I'm your host, Oliver Bogler, from NCI's Center for Cancer Training. Today, we're talking about NCI's Intramural Continuing Umbrella of Research Experiences, iCURE, a program which supports mentored research experiences, and our guests are the director of that program and a current fellow in it. Listen through to the end of the show to hear our guests make some interesting recommendations and where we invite you to take your turn. And of course, we're always glad to get your feedback on what you hear and suggestions on what you might like us to cover. The show's email is ncicc@nih.gov. It's a pleasure to welcome Dr. Jessica Calzola, the branch director of the Innovative Programs Branch in NCI's Center for Cancer Health Equity. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Excited to be here, Oliver.
It's also a pleasure to welcome Dr. Steffi Pitts, postdoctoral fellow in the Center for Immuno-Oncology in NCI's Center for Cancer Research and an iCURE scholar. Welcome.
Thank you.
Jessica, the iCURE program is described as supporting mentored research experiences. Could you elaborate on that, and what does it look like in practice?
Happy to. So thank you for the opportunity. So as you said, the iCURE provides mentored research experiences. So at the foundation of an iCURE scholar's experience is in fact the research. And they are matched with investigators within the NCI. That matching process is coordinated between the scholars and potential NCI faculty or investigators who have an interest in working with iCURE scholars. And, as you would expect, it's driven by mutual research interests. And then surrounding that experience, iCURE scholars have a plethora of support. So we offer scholars are matched and supported with what we call and have termed their mentor-scholar partnership. And this is kind of a multi-component partnership. The scholars, as I said, are matched with investigators at NCI, but they're also then, before they even get onboarded, we start prepping them and trying to support them. As we know, when you're on board at the NCI and NIH, there's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of things about moving to NCI and to Maryland. So we connect them with peer mentors. So these are scholars that are currently at NCI, and they can talk to them and usually try and match them with peer mentors at the same level. Once they onboard, we meet with them. The team meets with them every other month or more if needed to see how things are going and help identify if they need any resources or direct them to different things. Because NCI and NIH is a large institution, and there's lots of stuff out there to support the scholars. Sometimes it's just a matter of pointing them in the right direction for things they might need. Scholars are onboarded as a cohort. So they've got this built-in community, and we promote that community by setting up events where they come together and they learn things, they network. A little bit easier when you know that you've got people at the same level coming in at the same time to talk to. The program takes a holistic approach to supporting scholars. And we know that, they're here for a short transition in their careers to do research, but they're all going to move on to something. And so we match them with mentors outside their research group to kind of help them navigate those transitions. Are they going to grad school? If they're a postdoc, what does their next steps look like? Do they want to stay in the lab? Do they want to go into industry? So we match them with mentors to support and provide guidance for that. And, I think that kind of, as I said, that all of that together, we holistically support them.
Thanks. So Steffi, Jessica referenced the holistic approach. What is your experience being in the program?
Thank you. Yes. So it's definitely been the holistic approach that Jessica was referring to. So one of the things that I found really helpful is that every other month we have scheduled one-on-one meetings with the program directors. So either Jessica or Gregory. Those are just the scheduled ones. We can always meet with them more frequently if something comes up. I just found that really helpful to have someone outside of the lab who's there to ask you about your lab experience, how that's going, but also there to ask you about how is the move? How is your work-life balance? What's going on with you both professionally and personally? So that's really helpful. In addition to that, as she mentioned, we're matched with a mentor outside of our lab. So mine is another PI at NCI that I'm matched with, and he's been really helpful to talk to. One of the things that I also find really helpful is just having a cohort of peers, as Jessica mentioned. So we have events. We have events where we all come together for the welcome ceremony to welcome the new cohort. We all come together. There are certain workshops on topics such as networking or mentorship or things like that where we all come together. So that's been really helpful to have sort of a group of peers that I can talk to, because we all started at the same time and we're all sort of going through the same things.
Fantastic. You've both mentioned the cohorts. I think that makes sense. It sort of makes intuitive sense that being together in a group is valuable. I wonder, though, Jessica, you've run this program now for many years. When cohorts graduate out of the iCURE program, do they still stick together? Do you still have community?
I think it's like with any programs, there are some individuals within the cohorts who connect with each other and they form, long-standing friendships, and others where, it works when they're there at NCI and they stay connected. We always encourage, that whether it's iCURE or outside of iCURE, one of the lessons I think individuals need to remember is that everyone they worked with could be someone they need to lean on in the future. So we do encourage them to stay connected. And we invite alumni to events throughout the year. We have the welcome ceremony when we bring in the new cohort. We have a year-end gathering. And in fact, actually, the iCURE scholars, they lead, there's an iCURE scholar-led journal club, and they've initiated an annual alumni symposium. So this is a scholar-led alumni symposium where they bring in the alumni back and invite them to talk and about their experience during iCURE and after iCURE. So, that it's organically created, they form these friendships and they want to bring them back. So, yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about how you got into the program, Steffi. When did you first hear about iCURE and what was it like to apply?
So I heard about it online. When I was in undergrad, I did my undergrad up at Brown, but I grew up in Arlington, Virginia. So when I came back for the summer, I did this program called the Cancer Research Interns Program at the NCI. And so that was sort of my first introduction to the NIH, where I did a summer research experience between my junior and senior years in undergrad. And then I really liked it. And so after that, I sort of always had in mind that I wanted to come back to the NIH. And so I was sort of always on the lookout for different opportunities to come back to the NIH. Sort of toward the end of my graduate school career, I was looking for different opportunities to come back to the NIH. And then I heard about the iCURE program online. Then I put my application in.
So you applied for iCURE at the same time as you were applying to join the NCI as a postdoc?
So I didn't apply separately to join the NCI as a postdoc. I only applied through iCURE.
Got it.
So I think the applications when I was finishing up my grad school was due, I think they were due in January of that year. So I did have to apply earlier than a lot of people apply for postdocs like right as they're writing their thesis and such like that. So it was a bit of an earlier deadline. So I did have to plan ahead a little bit. But when I applied to iCURE, then they go through the process. When you do your application, they help match you with API through the iCURE program.
Got it. So, Jessica, the iCURE is only for people who come into the intramural program at NCI, right?
Yes, we generally like to see individuals coming, from the outside to the NCI. There is some considerations for those who might already be at the NCI, but our primary goal is to bring individuals from outside into the intramural research program to experience it and hopefully kind of encourage them to think about it as an opportunity for the future.
Yeah, and there's a whole CURE program, which is for people who are not at the NCI, and we're not going to talk about that today. That's for another episode. But in the iCURE program, Jessica, what are you looking for in the applicants?
We're looking for an interest in cancer research, which we know there's a huge continuum of what cancer research can look. And importantly, how a research experience, for the 2 to 3 years or 2 to 5 years that a scholar would be at the NCI, how that will build and be part of their career trajectory. So, why do they want to do research, a genuine interest, and how that can help them in the future. That I would say that's like the most important thing for a scholar.
And Jessica, you mentioned already a little bit about how you're part of the support you give your iCURE scholars is that preparation for the next step. What does that look like for many of your scholars? Have you been keeping track of some?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm happy to say that we've actually just hit like a big number this year with our new cohort. We're over 100 scholars now since the beginning of the program. And of course, with any program, we've had some attrition. So some individuals have left before the close of the program. A little over 60 scholars have transitioned. And, for our postbacks, 82% of them have gone to graduate school. This includes, PhD, a medical school, MD, PhD, as well as a couple master's and PhD programs. Our graduate students have all graduated and are doing postdocs. Most of them actually end up liking NCI and choosing to stay here in NCI. So majority do and postdoc at NCI, but we do have had some that have transitioned to industry and are doing postdocs there. And then our postdoc fellows, so 78% of them have transitioned and are staying at the bench. And when I say that, I mean, that can include industry, that can include, staying at NIH and either NCI or a different institution, but also, EPA and the FDA and doing research. And then 17% are, still staying within the government and research administration.
And Steffi, how's that been for you? Do you already know your next step? Do you already know the path ahead? And how has iCURE helped you make sure that that's the right path for you? Or maybe you're still looking.
Yes. So I'm not exactly sure, but I am thinking of either staying at the NIH and becoming a staff scientist, or potentially going to the FDA and applying to be a drug product reviewer. And the way that iCURE has helped me is that in the every other month meetings with the program directors. So mine are with Gregory.
And we should just say that's Gregory Adams, right?
Oh, yes. Sorry. Gregory Adams. Yes. And he has provided contact information for iCURE scholars who have transitioned. So former iCURE postdocs who transitioned to the FDA. He provided contact information for me, and then I was able to do informational interviews to see how they got that job, when they started applying, things like that. So that was really helpful. But I'm not 100% sure. I am planning on staying in my current lab after the iCURE program ends. So the iCURE pays for 3 years for postdocs. And so I do plan to stay on as a postdoc in my current lab for at least another year after that.
Yeah, and I should just mention we have a program at NCI, the IO2F, the Interagency Oncology Task Force, that helps people find pathways into FDA. And that's one of the things you mentioned. And of course, we had staff scientists as guests on the show just a few weeks ago, telling us about the vital position that represents in the NCI intramural program. So it looks like you have really interesting options ahead of you.
Thank you.
So I wonder, Steffi, what is the most rewarding part of being in the iCURE program? The one thing that you think is the best part?
I think for me, it's to have the support network that they've provided. So it was really important for me to have sort of a network of peers. Well, I got really lucky in that my current lab, it's a big lab, and I have a great network of peers in my current lab. But the iCURE program also provided an even bigger network of peers, and I feel like I've made some really good friends through the iCURE program. So just as an example, one of the friends that I've made through the iCURE program, we go to the gym together. We just took a trip together. So we really do make sort of friendships at these events.
That's fantastic. It's an important part of life. So, yeah. Jessica, what's the best part of leading iCURE?
So seeing the scholar succeed, and I gotta state that success is dependent on the scholar. When they say they want to do something and they achieve that, that's fabulous to hear. So whether it's applying for an award, getting to travel to a conference and present, publishing, right, that's not easy. Writing a manuscript, tackling that, presenting, or those transitions to graduate school or different positions, that's their victories, I celebrate them for myself too, because it's amazing.
What advice would you give to someone who is curious or interested in iCURE and is thinking about applying? Jessica, let's start with you.
Yeah, so we are open for applications now. And so we open generally for applications in the fall of each year. If you're interested in applying, I would say, check out the pre-application webinar, and listen and check out the information. And, what I really say is the key here is an interest in doing research at NCI, right? You don't need to know who you want to work with. And the reality is there's literally hundreds of investigators you could possibly work with. And so that can be overwhelming. But what you need to know is you do want to do cancer research in some part of the continuum, and we can help facilitate and match you if you're selected for the program. So just check out the program, the information, see if you are interested in moving to Maryland and working in NCI. Give it a shot, try and apply. I always tell people it's easy. I would recommend applying for things, and then you can close the door if it gets open for you, right? You can't walk through if you don't even try. I strongly encourage people thinking about and trying for things, and you can always come back and change your mind.
And what kinds of iCURE scholar positions? You have postdocs, obviously. Steffi's here. What other positions?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So we support postbacks, so individuals who are graduated within the past 3 years with their bachelor's, as well as postback individuals can also include postmasters. So individuals who have gotten their master's degree within the past, I think, 6 months, and then graduate students. Now, for graduate students, these are individuals who are enrolled in PhD programs, and when they onboard with the program, we want them to be past their qualifier. So there's kind of optimal timing. And if you're an interested graduate student and you're not quite sure when you should apply, I would encourage reaching out to the team at iCURE@nih.gov to kind of inquire and better understand. For graduate students, they come here and they're doing, part of their dissertation research here at NCI, and it's a collaboration with their mentor at their home institution.
At their home university. We're not a graduate school, so
exactly.
We'll put all these links in the show notes so that you can find the emails and the links. Steffi, your advice to someone curious about iCURE who's thinking of applying.
So the application process has several different stages. So after we submit our application, then we interview with the program directors. So that would be Jessica and Gregory. And then after that, there are interviews with the various PIs that they help match us with. And so I guess my advice would be, one thing that really helped me was that in addition to the half hour or so interview with the PI and Jessica and Gregory, I also reached out to some of the PIs that I had interviewed with. And I was doing my PhD about an hour away from here. So I asked to come and visit the lab. And so I came to visit the lab, a few labs actually, and I was able to talk to the PI in person, but also I was able to talk to the people in the lab, like the other people in the lab. And I found that to be really helpful in trying to figure out which lab environment would work best for me, because I think that the lab environment, everyone at NIH is doing really cutting edge research, but I think that figuring out which lab environment works for you is really helpful.
It's great advice. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And when we return, we'll talk career paths.
Calling all senior oncologists committed to community oncology and reducing health disparities. Are you passionate about shaping the next generation of researchers? Apply to the Warder McCaskill-Stevens Career Development Award for Community Oncology and Prevention Research K-12 program and mentor promising clinical scientists. This unique NCI program supports the training of clinical scientists in community cancer prevention, screening, intervention, control, and treatment research. The program welcomes proposals for innovative research and career development programs with an equity lens and a focus on increasing diversity in clinical trials. As a program leader, you would guide clinical scientists from various oncology specialties as they conduct research, potentially even leading their own independent clinical trials. This is a chance to leverage your expertise and to make a lasting impact on cancer research and care in underserved communities. For more information about the McCaskill-Stevens K-12, including how to apply and our staff contact details, visit our webpage. The link is in the show notes.
All right, we're back. Steffi, let's start with you. What first sparked your interest in science, in biology?
So, one of the things is that a lot of people in my family are scientists. So, they always sort of fostered an interest in biology and science in me. And I always knew that a PhD as a career path was an option. The other thing is that I went to a science and tech high school or a magnet school. And so I was exposed pretty early on to molecular biology. And I actually took a DNA science class in high school that I really
Wow.
enjoyed. And so that's what sort of inspired me to then major in biology in college. And then after doing the cancer research internship during the summer when I was an undergrad, then I wanted to do my PhD.
And I know you got interested in cancer as well as a domain, right?
Yes, from the cancer research interns program. And another thing that I really liked, so that program, so when I was doing that between my junior and senior years as an undergrad, I was sort of unsure about whether or not I wanted to go into a PhD or an MD. But my the lab that I was in, it was at NCI, and it was headed by an MD PhD PI. And so he had a clinic, and there were patient samples in the lab, and there were also a variety. There were some MDs in the lab, there were some PhDs, there were some MD PhDs. And so I got to see what each role could really do. And so I knew that I wanted to work with patient samples, but I wanted to focus more on the research. So that's what sort of made me lean toward a PhD.
Yeah, clarified this. That's great. Jessica, how about you? When did you know you wanted to be a scientist?
So I think this dates me a little bit, but I saw the movie Outbreak with Dustin Hoffman,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I fell in love with like the idea of being a microbiologist, and so I stuck with that. But there was a point in time where I realized like I thought I wanted to do like level 4 research, but I couldn't handle the anxiety of that. I decided it wasn't for me. But I did.
That's like
That,
Ebola
yeah,
hazmat suit stuff. Yeah, wow.
yeah, I thought that's what I wanted, but I knew microbiology
Okay.
was, I stuck with that. And, in my undergrad experience, I did some research experiences. I had a really great mentor who suggested I apply to the undergraduate scholarship program for NIH. And I was selected for that program and, ended up doing a summer internship with NCI with Dr. Susan Gottesman, and just kind of reaffirmed, the research interest, but also kind of sparked my interest in NIH and NCI. So
It sounds very much like in both your paths, mentors were really vital.
I would say absolutely, yeah. I don't think I would have applied to the NIH undergraduate scholarship program if they hadn't like literally brought it to me and said you should apply to this. I wasn't looking for that opportunity, and it was a suggestion. And that mentor came for the undergraduate scholarship program for the summer part. He came down when we did our poster presentations and was showed support that way. And he's been a good friend and mentor since.
So, Steffi, you now work in immuno-oncology, right? That's
Yes.
the group here, and that's a really hot area. What led you specifically to that part of cancer research?
So it's interesting because my background was not in that. When I was doing my first internship at NCI, I was doing more proteomics and looking at mechanisms of resistance to EGFR TKIs. And then when I was in grad school, I was doing again a lot of sort of biochemistry and looking at the preclinical development of an RNA polymerase 1 inhibitor. But I knew that I was always interested in the development of therapeutics. And so since I had all of this prior experience with small molecules, I then also knew that immunotherapy was a hot topic. And so I wanted to explore sort of that area of research. That's how I sort of came in, and I explained my background and how I wanted to look at immuno-oncology in my iCURE application. And then I was matched with and chose this lab, and it's been a great experience.
So, what's the focus of your project?
I'm working on a lot of different projects, but essentially we work with a lot with clinical trials, and we look at how various immunotherapeutic agents affect or modulate the immune system, looking at the peripheral immunome. So we take literally either plasma or serum, and we analyze the immune cells via flow cytometry to look at how the immunotherapy is modulating the immune system, and B, to see if we can find any biomarkers of response to see if certain patients are responding well versus certain patients are responding not so well, to see if we can identify biomarkers to see which trials they should be put on.
Interesting. Jessica, so at some point you decided to pivot into program leadership. And I'm wondering, what was the context? What led you to make that pivot?
Yeah, so for graduate school, I studied microbiology and molecular genetics and had a wonderful mentor and loved the experience. And as part of that undergraduate scholarship program that I mentioned, there's a contractual obligation to come back and work at the NIH. So I used that, to come back and do a postdoc. When I was thinking about my career as a graduate student into postdoc, I thought I should kind of pivot away from studying the microbe and look at how our body responds to the microbe. So I did a postdoc in a laboratory within the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, looking at modeling a response to toll-like receptor 4 to better understand sepsis development and prevention of sepsis development. I had a great mentor and a great lab, but there was a part of me that just didn't love it as much, the topic. And so I started exploring kind of other avenues. And if you talk to any of my brothers, so I'm one of four, I've always been bossy, is what they say, and always been the one to organize things with the family. And so, I started exploring. I participated in the Fellows Committee while I was a postdoc. I participated in there's a Research Excellence Award, and the committee for that. Actually, I was a co-chair for the committee for that. So I started taking doing things on the side in addition to my research that involved kind of organizing and engaging other scientists. And so I did some informational interviews and ended up with a position supporting the congressionally directed medical research programs. They're not NIH; they're congressionally directed. They're Army, military, but they're research programs with prostate cancer, breast cancer, and such. And got my foot in the door there and really liked it, and have kind of continued on that route.
So you already brought a natural skill set with you to this work, as you described. But I wonder what other things that you learned in your research phase of your career, that skills that were transferable to your current role.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to realize that even when you think you know how to do things, right, there's always room for improvement, right?
Sure.
As a scientist, I think the communication is a really important skill, right? Both writing and orally, because the best research comes from talking to others about it and getting other ideas. So presenting posters and presenting presentations on your research. So there's that skill, which is very important and transfers, I really think, to any career, across the continuum. And then scientists there's a lot of time management, right? Like, you're never doing just one experiment. You're never doing just one thing. You've got multiple experiments going. You're doing data analysis at the same time. So there's a lot of coordination and time management, which is, again, transferable to the career. And there's a level of project management also. Again, you've got multiple projects going. You've got a lot of science now is collaboration. You're working with other people to kind of navigate different parts and components of a project and moving it along. So all of those kind of transferred and were valuable in the new positions.
Thank you. The iCURE program, one of the goals of it is to address the, how shall I put it, underrepresentation of certain communities, people in the cancer research workforce, right? That's one of the things that's being addressed with iCURE and other programs. And iCURE is part of the efforts of the Center for Cancer Health Equity that has a much broader purview in that area. I wonder if you might both comment on your experience. Steffi, let's start with you in the iCURE program, given this sort of context of trying to make the cancer research workforce more diverse.
I think that in terms of networking, it's been really good because oftentimes it's really hard if you don't see people who look like you in the workforce. I mean, my lab is very diverse, but I know that in some branches they're less diverse than others. And so I think that having these events and being with a cohort who can relate to the same issues that you can is really helpful. Also, talking to Gregory, Adams, and Jessica, who I should add, they were both postdocs at NCI. I know Gregory was. They were both postdocs at NCI. So they were really helpful in providing further resources that could help you not only just with iCURE, but also through OITE.
That's the Office of Intramural Training and Education at NIH.
But I think mostly just having the network of peers and also of support. So I guess another thing that I wanted to add is that at a lot of these iCare events, we not only meet with Gregory and Jessica, but also some of the other staff within this CCHE are there. And so it's a great opportunity to talk to them and share experiences with them.
I mean, one thing that I guess that we're trying to achieve is a diversity of viewpoints, right, in our cancer research workforce, right? And is that's reflected, Steffi, in your experience of the program?
Yes.
Perfect. Jessica, your thoughts on this issue of diversity?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the program does, we strongly encourage applications from individuals who identify with underrepresented populations, but, diversity is at every level, right? It's at experience, it's demographics, it's socioeconomic status, it's within the continuum of cancer research, there's diversity. The iCURE program, we're trying to encourage people to think about NCI as an option for their career path. And we try and reduce some of the barriers for applying and getting into the NCI environment by kind of not requiring individuals to identify investigators right away, right? Because that can be intimidating. Like I said, there's hundreds of PIs, lots of cutting edge, exciting research, and that can be overwhelming to try and identify. So all you need to do, is know that you want to give cancer research a try and that you're really interested in kind of learning about it and engaging with it. And showing that this is an option for people who might not have realized that there's this intramural research program that's out there, right? That's not always something people are even aware of. And so just sharing information about it, disseminating it to groups and institutions where they may not have known about it is kind of what we're trying to do when we bring individuals in.
Steffi, I wonder, as your career progresses, and I realize the path is not yet defined or picked, but as you progress and increasingly mentor people, I wonder what your experience in the iCURE program has brought to your own notion of how to mentor people.
So one of my friends in my cohort is a grad student, came in as a grad student. So she's, not a postdoc yet. So it was, I guess I sort of was able to informally mentor in terms of providing advice on, how to finish up the PhD, how to approach writing the dissertation. That was helpful in terms of having a cohort. Not only there were tons of postdocs in my cohort that I could also talk to about issues that I was dealing with, but then also having a cohort that included some graduate students or some postbacks. I know at some of the events, there were a lot of postbacks who were asking me about my experience applying to grad school. So I was able to sort of informally mentor them. And so I think that that's been helpful.
Jessica, you received, I think quite recently, the Director's Award for your role in the iCURE program. Is that correct?
I think it might have been a couple years ago, but that sounds like I got something at some point.
That's recent. What accomplishments are you most proud of in your work with iCURE to date?
The program, we're in our 7th year. We're welcoming our 7th cohort, and I'm proud of where it's come, over the past several years, and the community and that's that the scholars have and that I see that's grown from it, that I mentioned that alumni symposium that the scholars have organized. I think we all remember that COVID was not long ago, and the iCURE kind of launched a couple years before COVID, so we had that had an impact on everyone, and I I see the program's kind of grown and our understanding of what scholars and researchers are expecting and how things are changing with COVID. I'm proud of how we've kind of adapted to that, and we're still getting amazing individuals applying to the iCure and getting them interested in cancer research, but balancing that now with how what people are looking for in life.
There's a lot of conversation in biomedical career space about challenges that early career individuals who are thinking about this pathway and are coming into it or contemplating coming into it are facing, right? There's a sort of a big shift going on. I wonder what your thoughts are and your advice might be to someone who might be listening, who might be in high school or an undergraduate and might be thinking about cancer research specifically, or even just academic biomedical research. What would your advice be to someone at that stage thinking those thoughts with regard to this career path? Steffi, let's start with you.
I think that in terms of advice for people, I think it would be to keep an open mind, because when I was even when I was looking for when I was trying to figure out which lab I wanted to do as my postdoc, a lot of people were telling me, "Oh, you don't have any experience in this. You should go to a lab that you've been doing a lot of biochemistry. You have a strong skill set in biochemistry. You should keep staying in biochemistry and just do what you're comfortable with." For me, I knew that I sort of wanted to get a more holistic view of drug development, and I wanted to see what the immunotherapy side was like. And I knew that I could bring sort of a unique skill set to my new lab and a unique sort of point of view. And I was lucky to find a lab that was very helpful and willing to train me in the new techniques. And that was very open to me having a different background and had other individuals that had different backgrounds. And it's been one of the best decisions that I've made to go into this immunotherapy lab, because now it gives me a better sort of holistic view. So I guess to keep an open mind, that would be my advice to people looking to pursue a career.
Thank you. Jessica.
So first, I think it's important for everyone to recognize that career paths are never linear. I think there's this underlying assumption that everyone, you've got an idea of what you want to do and you get there and you go straight there. And I don't think that wasn't true for me. And I think that's a theme I've heard from, many leaders across the cancer research workforce. And so understanding that, your path will not be linear, and I think it's important to take opportunities as they arise that you think are interesting, because you never know what kind of doors that could open. You may think you want to do something, and then you try out an experience and realize that that's of interest, and that's a strength you have, and it might change your trajectory. And importantly, you're going to come across a lot of people in life, and recognizing that you might be surprised at the number of people and where someone comes from that you end up going back to and asking, for advice or for connections to get you to where you want to go. So, taking advantage of talking to people, and learning about people and how they got to where they're going and what they're doing, and staying connected with them. So I guess that's a couple different things there, the mentoring and network aspect, the resilience in that your pathway might not be linear, but take opportunities and, keep pushing forward if you know what you want to do.
Thank you. That's great advice from both of you. Thank you. Now it's time for a segment we call Your Turn, because it's a chance for our listeners to send in a recommendation that they would like to share. If you're listening, then you're invited to take your turn. Send us a tip for a book, a video, a podcast, or a talk, anything really that you found inspirational or amusing or interesting. You can send these to us at ncicc@nih.gov. Record a voice memo, send it along, and we will play it on an upcoming episode. Now I'd like to invite our guests to take their turn. Let's start with you, Jessica.
Oh, thank you. So What I'd actually recommend is stepping outside your comfort zone. So, and my example is that I have been part of a Dungeons and Dragons campaign now for going on 4 years, and this is not
Yay.
something I would have done ever before. And I'm still, it really takes me every time we do it out of my comfort zone. I am not someone who's into acting or anything, and it's taught me a lot and helped me grow, professionally even. But it's, something fun on the side that I do with, my husband and our friends. So don't be afraid to step out of the comfort zone and try something new.
That might be the best advice we've ever had on the show. Sources say you play a cleric. Is that correct?
That is accurate. I'm a support person. That's my. Although I tend to be a tank, so as well. Like I tend to have a lot of buffers. So yeah.
Fantastic. I think I've just outed myself as a fellow D&D player. So thank you for that recommendation, Steffi.
This sort of goes with stepping outside of your comfort zone, but I would recommend one experience that I found to be really rewarding is joining a running club. And I never really considered, or still don't consider myself a runner, but I think it's a really great way to meet people in your neighborhood, especially if you've just moved to a particular area, while also getting exercise and making new friends. So I know that running clubs are becoming more, I'd heard that running clubs are becoming more popular, but I'd never really tried one until recently, and it's been great. So
That's great advice. Fantastic. Thank you very much. So I'd like to make a recommendation as well. I'm a huge fan of The Expanse, a science fiction series of books written by James S.A. Corey and then made into a really fabulous TV show as well. Both of them are fantastic in their own right and transport you to a future where humanity has colonized the solar system. It's a future filled with political tensions and technological advancements and the ever-present threat of conflict. Sounds familiar, maybe. The series delves into the implications of space travel and colonization, exploring themes like artificial gravity, resource scarcity, and the challenges of adapting to life beyond Earth. It doesn't just gloss over the science, though, and that's one of the reasons I like it. It's very grounded in real-world physics, making the story feel relatively plausible and immersive. You follow a diverse set of characters, lots of interesting folks, and the story is full of twists and turns, keep you on the edge of your seat. And I recently learned that there is a role-playing game, an RPG, based on The Expanse, and I am actually in the process of joining a game where I will myself, at least in my imagination, go into space. So that's my recommendation. Well, let me thank you both very much for your participation in our podcast and your advice and sharing your stories. Thank you so much.
Thank you again for the invitation.
yes, thank you for inviting us.
That's all we have time for on today's episode of Inside Cancer Careers. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to our guests. We want to hear from you. Your stories, your ideas, and your feedback are welcome. And you're invited to take your turn and make a recommendation to share with our listeners. You can reach us at ncicc@nih.gov. Inside Cancer Careers is a collaboration between NCI's Office of Communications and Public Liaison and the Center for Cancer Training. It is produced by Angela Jones and Astrid Masfar. Join us every first and third Thursday of the month, wherever you listen. Subscribe so you won't miss an episode. If you have questions about cancer or comments about this podcast, you can email us at nci.info@nih.gov or call us at 800-422-6237. And please be sure to mention Inside Cancer Careers in your query. We are a production of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, National Institutes of Health, National Cancer Institute. Thanks for listening.